To start off the panel discussion, I would like to share a personal story with you. Because a few weeks ago I was in Australia, and while I was in Australia I was browsing for some flights for actually my summer holiday. And I typed in at Google, I typed in flight, and Google told me that my next flight was leaving at that Tuesday and was flying from Melbourne to Shanghai. And this got me thinking, like, how does Google know when I'm leaving Melbourne? But then I soon realized that I sent my e-ticket to my Gmail account, and of course Google is reading my email, as I probably gave them permission for in a user agreement that nobody reads. But so Google knows when I'm flying, which is convenient. But this got me thinking, because a few years ago when I rented my apartment, my rental agency asked me to send my passport, a copy of my passport via email. So I did. So Google also knows what's my social security number. And I'm not sure if I'm really comfortable that Google knows my social security number. So this will bring me to my first thesis for the panel discussion. Am I as a user responsible for the traces I leave on the internet? Or does Google, in this case, or maybe the rental agency, has also responsibility in which data can I put up on the internet? So I would like to first ask the audience, what do you think? Was I the ignorant citizen that was uploading his passport to Gmail? Or is there responsibility for Google as well? So please raise your green card if you agree that users are responsible themselves for what they upload to the internet. Well, this is a nice thesis, I guess, because there is some controversy. So it's a good starting point. So secondly, I would like to ask our experts of today, how do you feel about this?
I'm already wearing one, so
you have to share that one.
I would like to congratulate you with the fact that half the room doesn't think you're an idiot.
It's improving.
I could respond if you, unless you want, but I'm in this a bit twofold. I think one, I think the consumer needs to be very aware of what they're placing online. I also think that many consumers do not have either the insight or the experience to discover what it is that is being tracked. Like the Facebook photograph, for instance. Not many people know that Facebook actually does this. They're not even aware that they do facial recognition. They just think that an upload of photo is an upload of photo. So if you're not aware, especially Facebook makes it very difficult for you to find out that this is going on. So yes, consumers have their own responsibility, but I also think companies have a responsibility to be transparent about what they're collecting and what they're doing with that.
I have an addition to make to that, because I think for your rental example, the person you're renting your apartment from has a purpose for clarifying your identity, whereas Google has absolutely no purpose for sticking its nose into that information. In the Netherlands, you have to have a legal basis, for example, to process your BSN, your social security number on your passport. So where you can have a perfect purpose for providing your passport copy to your travel agency, to KLM and those kind of companies, to your renter, Google has absolutely no purpose for processing that data any further, so they shouldn't. That's from a legal perspective. If that's reality, that's something different, but they shouldn't.
So I think I agree also with what is being said. I also think you cannot really expect from a company to do good in some sense, although it's very nice that they would, right? So I know Nedap, does good. Google claims they do good, and I like responsibility. But their first goal is to make money, and in some sense, that's what you should expect from them to do. So I think we can require them to be very transparent, and with this I really agree. So we can choose whether we want to buy or engage with that product. And I think the government, and this wasn't said, but I think the government has a clear role in setting the boundaries. What is what is allowed and what is not. And this is also what's happening in Europe. So that's my response.
Okay. And how do you feel about those? You mentioned those boundaries. In my opinion, if my mailman would open my mail, I would be very upset. But somehow I'm not upset when Google reads my mail.
So my response to this would be, if you are upset about an algorithm at Google reading your mail, which is not the same as a person reading your mail, then you should not use Gmail. So ideally, this is how it would work in a marketplace. There is an alternative, right? Hopefully, and if if enough people will not use Gmail, then other, Gmail or other mail services will spring up which will actually not read your mail, right? So I believe in a market, but it has to be transparent. Otherwise, we don't understand what choice we are making. And of course, certain things are illegal, and those boundaries should be clear too.
And how can we guarantee this transparency? Because these user agreements are usually really big, and everybody is annoyed by reading them.
Yep.
So
there is one big difference between the US and Europe, and I may be shouting now in a church, but what Google is doing is actually illegal in Europe. What they're doing is they are requesting your consent via the terms and conditions or via the privacy statement, and Facebook is doing the same. And Europe, we've said, all the DPAs, all the data protection authorities have said that obtaining consent via terms and conditions and privacy statement doesn't obtain a lawful consent. So that's where there is a big difference between US and Europe. To obtain more transparency, it would be clearer if you could just tick the box with a specific clarification that they're actually reading your Gmail, combining it with your YouTube use and doing that all together without having to pull to a whole book to find out that they're actually doing that. And then stating at the bottom of that, by using our services, you agree to this. So from my perspective, if I would advise clients, and we have some of the big US clients, we always state every time again that isn't a form of lawful consent in the EU. But
isn't that a bit of a paper discussion, because consumers will actually say, most consumers will actually say, oh, that's a pretty neat trick what Google just pulled there. They instantly know where I'm going, and this is, you were looking for a holiday, but what if you're in an airport trying to get your next flight? And Google will detect that you're in the airport and tell you when your next flight is. They really helped you, even though they were in breach of all sorts of laws and did something that, if you think about it, is actually very scary. Because it's your mailman. It's very similar to the mailman coming up to you in the airport, running next to you and saying, look, I figured it out. Your flight's at gate 53B and is leaving in 10 minutes. So consumers are actually, I really don't believe that they're going to even think twice before ticking the box and giving their consent, because they get some service in return. I believe
I called it the Holy Grail, because I don't think that without clear information people will give an informed consent, and there you get into the Holy Grail, because then it will just be an empty consent. On the other side, if you say to people, hey, we've got this great service whereby we can predict where you're going, I don't know, even in traffic, people would, I think, be more willing to provide consent. There's also
So maybe there is a role for us or for other institutions to clearly stipulate what are the actual dangers. So many young people will just simply say, I don't care, anybody has my data, I didn't do anything wrong, they can have it, right? But then maybe they didn't think about possibilities of what can go wrong. So I'm in favor of actually having case scenarios of ways that, very practical ways that things can go badly wrong, and then sort of informing the public that way. Not only the negative things, but also the positive things, so we can make a clear choice.
Is it more or interesting for a company like Nedap, I guess, is we're all discussing the examples of two companies in particular, Google and Facebook, and they're the eternal examples of how things can go terribly wrong or how they will mislead their consumers. We're not only subscribing to Facebook and Google, we're subscribing to, I believe on average, something like 300 online services in a time frame of less than 5 years. And each of these companies can do the exact same thing. They're just not that big and not well known and not that scary because of their size. But what I find is that if you're transparent and open about what you do with your data, you get a far bigger loyalty from your customers. And Google and Facebook, they can actually not care about customer loyalty because they have 1 billion customers. And you can afford to lose some. But for at least most of the business-to-business, because this is not just a private thing, this is a business-to-business thing as well. For most business-to-businesses companies, obtaining customer loyalty is far more important than obtaining the data. Because if you get customer loyalty, you know for sure that your source, your raw material, your data is going to stay. And with Facebook and Google, it's a mathematical certainty that they're going to have enough data to process their algorithms. But if your company is a lot smaller, you need to be very careful of the raw material of data, your data collection, and make sure that these people know what they're spending with you, what they're giving to you, and make sure that they keep giving it to you because they're comfortable with the idea that you're using it in the right way.
Okay. So there seems to be some big controversy in the audience as well. Is there maybe somebody in the audience who would like to respond about what's the responsibility of a user and what do you leave online and what not? Okay. Well, then we keep it on stage.
There is
running man.
Should be part of the discussion the awareness in the audience that actually everything comes at a cost, because we seem to be pretty naive when it comes to the ethical approach of businesses like Google and others. We expect them to be ethical, but we don't like ads in our emails and things like that. So we don't expect to pay for things, and still we expect them to be ethical. And this may be a naive approach that we as a consumer in general have, and it's getting worse and worse, it seems. That's my take on it.
Well, the point is sorry, go ahead.
I just want to ask, is it really unethical to have ads in your email? I don't think it's unethical to be presented ads.
No, not the ads, but reading emails either through algorithms or personal, that seems a little unethical if you're not really consent to that. But showing ads would not be unethical, but would be maybe not accepted by people, because they would say, I don't like the ads, so find another way to make money. It's like maybe 10 years ago when we had all the websites showing ads and nobody was using the websites that showed ads. They said, oh, we don't want that. So find another business model. And they did. They tried to exploit the data that you're actually giving to them. So nothing...
Can I ask you a question? Do you have a Spotify account?
No.
Anyone with a Spotify account? You can unlimited music for free. It's not for free. And it's not for the ads that you get. You get annoying ads. If you want to get rid of the ads, you pay 15 euros a month, 10 or 15 euros a month. But that's not where it stops. Spotify collects huge amounts of information about you and your listening preferences. And they sell it to music companies that will actually target you with concerts for artists. And they will actually plan concert tours for artists based on the data that they get from Spotify on whether or not people are... And they can rearrange the tour dates for a particular artist if they find out that a particular group in a particular country is listening to that kind of music more often than regular. So I think the one good thing about it is that it leaves consumers the choice to actually pay for the stuff and not get the ads. But there should also be a way where you could pay for the stuff and not leave your data.
And why do you think that there's not such a solution yet?
At least I don't know it.
Well, Pandora has that solution, I think. So Pandora, you can basically...
Oh, well, yeah.
You can pay and get rid of all the ads. I'm not sure about the data, but you can at least get rid of all the ads. Yeah.
Sorry, does everybody know Pandora? It's the safe alternative for Facebook. And it was actually Pandora was born out of the frustration that Facebook collects that much data, and they wanted a social network that doesn't.
So Pandora is the safe solution.
Pandora is the safe solution. It's just that there are there are about 195 other people on Pandora, so it also saves you a lot of time.
Okay, so and today we have been talking about Google and Facebook a lot, and you also already mentioned the differences between Europe and the US. Is it a coincidence that both Facebook and Google are American-based companies?
Yes. No, it's not a coincidence.
No, it's not a coincidence. I
Why-
think there
why
are
not?
more examples in the US
Than in Europe.
than in Europe. I think they have a different perception on privacy. I know from both companies the privacy departments and also the business development, and they're challenging. They are challenging current ideas, and both are working very hard on privacy concept and data protection concept, but they search for the boundaries of legislation. And that's what makes it challenging to work from a US perspective, because it's not like they're working without rules in the US. They're facing the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, on privacy allegations. They have a lot of awareness privacy where was also on the other side of the ocean. So it's not just a European nagging thing, but it's more like on both sides of the ocean they get into privacy discussions, and they're very aware of that, but they also try to make a business, try to make money, and try to challenge the law.
So, but isn't the privacy laws in Europe then limiting our business development? Like, I think it would be good for European economy if we had Facebook or Google in Europe based.
I'm not sure it has much to do with the privacy issue. It's Silicon Valley versus Europe.
So it's not US, it's Europe versus Silicon Valley.
I think Silicon Valley is a very special place, very creative, innovative place, and we don't have it yet at that scale, in Europe. Nedap could be the next, big company.
So Groenlo will become the next Silicon Valley.
Maybe Twente becomes the next Silicon Valley in Europe, but we're just not quite there yet, I think. And I think that's why we see all these companies these big companies in the US right now.
And what's your feeling about this, Arend?
I also think that it doesn't have anything in particular to do with the US or Europe location. It's I think the business environment around about the time that the two companies started was far better for that kind of company to arise in the US than it was in Europe. And the mentality of startups, I actually believe that the success of both companies is in the mentality, is that they could keep the mentality of a startup for a far longer period of time than other companies. They could keep on innovating and reinventing themselves and being the odd guy out in developing new services. There's an interesting thing about Google that it's the first chapter in my book explains how Google became so big. And it was they had a very good search algorithm, but they had some very, very big competitors. They had something called Alta Vista. It was, from a technology point of view, it was a really, really strong competitor. It had Alta Vista was a muscle flexing exercise for Compaq or for DEC, the Digital Equipment Corporation. They were trying to show off how much computing power they had. And they found out something, they tried to leave everything out of the website that was irrelevant. So no images, no ads, just a small search box, type in your search, press OK, and within a second you would have a result. And Google just did that, but with a slightly smarter search algorithm. So they had slightly better results, but they were equally fast. And then they could do that because they had venture capital. The Digital Equipment Corporation was doing this as a marketing stunt, and they could pull up something like $100 million a year to show off their computing skills. And then Google all of a sudden got a couple of $100 million in venture capital, and they could do this for 5 years without making any money. Until that money ran out, and they had to find a business model. And they could do two things. They could build a better search engine and charge money for it. They could put up ads, which would slow down the search engine and remove the competitive advantage to Alta Vista. Or they could figure out something to advertise without images. And that's how they came up with the idea of doing the small text ads, because they're lightning fast to transport over the internet. And then something stole a good idea on selling AdWords. It wasn't invented by Google, as many people think, but somebody else had the idea, and they sort of nicked it. Where you could bid money on a keyword. So if somebody was looking for let's say Nedap, Nedap could place a bid on if anyone is looking for Nedap, I want my ad to be placed there, and I'm willing to pay $10 for it. And then somebody else would come up and say, Nedap, I'm willing to pay 12 cents, and they would be on top. And then this bidding system evolved into a money-making machine that now makes them €1 billion or €6 billion dollars a year. And 91% of that is from these small text ads. And that propelled them, that simple idea just skyrocketed Google. Facebook did exactly the same thing. They're using ads. That's the only money-making mechanism that they have right now. They're making these small ads and selling keywords. So their business, and only after they became big with that, they started doing other stuff like reading your email.
Question from the audience.
Yeah, I was wondering. I'm still stuck on a little bit on my previous question too. But if the laws in the European Union are becoming more and more strict towards giving civilians more control over their data, do you guys think it will ever reach a point that every data will be owned by the person who generates it? Because that would make some interesting, have some interesting repercussions for a lot of the business models we've been discussing.
I think that's a very interesting discussion. I don't have the answer right now because in contracts I see a lot about ownership of data. And when I ask the companies, what do you mean by own data? Because there is no real ownership of data from a legal perspective. Although a lot of companies try to write it down in contracts, it's like thin air. It doesn't mean anything, I own the data. Do I believe that in due time consumers will have more control over their own data if they see that actually the money is their data? I'm not sure about that because I think customers are quite naive still. Although they are every day in the newspapers tackled by privacy issues, when they do a big questionnaire, every time they say, well, we have nothing to hide, so we want to give up our privacy. So I don't know. I don't know how that will evolve, that people will take control of their own data and will say to a company, well, this is my data. I'm willing to sell it to you, but you actually have to pay a price for it.
Yeah, actually, I'm willing to make a prediction here. So my prediction is that our data, that's the data that's in our phone or on our computers, or will at some point you can sort of submit it to some service. The service will put it in a shell, and every time, and people can then query that data, and whatever the answer to that query is will be privacy preserving, guaranteed. And the person who queries the data will have to pay, let's say, a couple of cents for that particular question. And I think there can be a marketplace like that, where data is owned by yourself and other people who want to use that data can query it and build their big models on them. So Google would then have to pay a whole lot of money to build their big prediction models. And that seems fair to me. So I think that's the future, and I'm willing to bet on that.
So I guess, do you want to add something to this? Or?
If you want to try this out, it exists. It's called Data Coop. C-O-U-P, Data Coop. I made $1.53. Seriously. So that says something about my social life, yeah. Because I'm selling only my Facebook data, and I'm not on Facebook. Well, I'm on Facebook, but I don't do anything there. No, it's. I think it's an interesting thought, and I've been with DataCoop for quite a while now because it's interesting to see what they do. They do exactly this. The benefit is obvious. One of the potential risks is that people will find it too cumbersome to administer their own data in order to actually do it. So there will be some sort of automatic mechanism that will arrange this for you, and that really brings it down to the same situation where you are now. Either you use everything or you use nothing. But it's an interesting ride. I feel something for both views.
Maybe interesting from a legal perspective that in the new regulation, which is the future of data protection legislation, there's no such right. All the very intelligent ministers and all very intelligent legislators have not come up with this idea. So that's gives food for thought.
Well, due to the time, I would like to round up, and I would like to ask the panel one final question, because we have seen that big data is changing really fast. Machine learning, deep learning is evolving really fast. So, and we already touched the topic of the future a few times. I would like to ask each of you, what do you expect from the future regarding big data to make it even broader?
4 minutes. Divided by 3.
He should be last. Okay, so I think clearly we're on a sort of upward slope, and our predictive models will become more and more accurate. What I really hope for is far better sort of things like personalized medicine. That's where I think I see huge benefits, and that's where I really think we will see a lot of change. If you will go deep into the future, you know my slide. I'm not very worried about Terminator robots or things like that. I think there, we'll see, the use of AI in a negative way. For instance, you can think of drones, right? If you have swarms of sort of autonomous smart drones and think of them as a weapon, that feels really scary to me. And we'll have to think about how to deal with this.
And in which time frame do you think we can expect this personal medicines?
Oh, it's happening. It's happening, and it's going. It's not the technology; it's the privacy laws and that kind of things, which is holding us back.
So technology is not limiting it.
No, I don't think we have the technology. We can pull all this data together. We can build very powerful models from it. If you give us the data, we'll do great things with it. But at this point, it's very difficult to pull the data together, both the sort of the personal medicine and the sort of drone example are not very far into the future. Maybe 5 years, 10 years is not at all strange. This thing could happen very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, if I look at my own customers right now, I hope they're all going to engage in the big data challenge, because a lot of my customers have the ambition, but are actually not yet engaging in the big data projects. And that's also because of the legal implications. And what I hope is that more companies try to drive innovation, but also take the privacy challenge. And even if that means setting out boundaries which go beyond and challenging the authorities and the legislator, I would hope that they do that in the future.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll keep it brief.
Yeah.
I believe that I see the point that you were making, but I believe that innovation will not be stifled by legislation. In fact, I think innovation will find a way, and I think you in the audience are actually a very good example of that. I believe that we will continue making products that will keep consumers happy. There is no way in which a company like Facebook could survive if it was really, really bad and we all hated it. So we'll have some very big crashes. We'll have some very big hacker accidents where people steal patients' files. We'll have some very nasty experiences. But overall, I think we'll continue to deliver goods that consumers are really eager to use. And they'll be based on data for a far bigger percentage than we can even imagine.
Sounds like a great final statement. So that brings me to this one, to the end of today's program. But I would like to thank, of course, the speakers of today. So one more time, I would like to ask you for a big round of applause for our speakers of today.